She thought she could get rid of him with one phone call. What she didn't know was that the man she was targeting had the power to arrest her himself. When Detective Ethan Cole moved into Willow Creek Estates, he expected a peaceful new chapter in life. The neighborhood was known for its manicured lawns, white picket fences, and residents who proudly followed every HOA rule to the letter. For Ethan, it was a quiet escape from the chaos of city crime scenes. He was looking forward to a fresh start, unmarked by sirens, weerwoord, and endless investigations. But peace rarely lasts long in a place where one person feels entitled to control everyone else. That person was Karen. Karen was the self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood. With her clipboard in one hand and her phone always ready to dial, she made it her mission to inspect, report, and confront. To her, every neighbor was either a potential violator or a project to be fixed. When she noticed Ethan moving boxes into his house without first introducing himself to the HOA board, suspicion immediately flared. From across the street, Karen stood with arms crossed, eyeing every detail. The unmarked government vehicle in Ethan's driveway looked too plain for Willow Creek. His work boots, his late-night unloading, and even his lack of decorative flower pots all became evidence in her mind that he didn't belong. The next morning, Ethan stepped outside to grab the mail. He barely had time to unfold the first envelope before Karen approached, heels clicking on the pavement like a judge about to deliver a verdict. "You can't just move in here without notice," she snapped, pointing toward his driveway. "This neighborhood has standards, and I don't see your paperwork with the HOA office. That car? It's not even registered here." Ethan gave a calm smile. "Ma'am, I assure you, everything is in order. This house is mine, and I've already paid all necessary dues." But Karen didn't soften. In fact, her voice grew louder, enough to draw the attention of curious neighbors peeking from behind their curtains. "We'll see about that. People like you think you can slip through the rules, but not on my watch." Ethan could have ended the argument right there by pulling out his badge, but instead, he simply nodded and walked back inside. Something told him this was only the beginning, and part of him wanted to see just how far Karen would go. Karen never believed in letting things go. Once she had set her eyes on Ethan, she decided it was her responsibility to protect the neighborhood from him. By the second week, her irritation had turned into obsession. Every time Ethan's garage door opened, Karen appeared at her window. Every time his porch light came on, she made a note on her clipboard. To her, Ethan wasn't just a neighbor. He was a rule breaker who needed to be dealt with. Ethan, however, remained unbothered. He went about his life calmly, unpacking boxes, jogging in the mornings, and leaving for work in his plain vehicle. He kept his badge and profession hidden. The last thing he wanted was unnecessary attention. But Karen was making that impossible. One warm Saturday morning, Ethan was sweeping his driveway when Karen stormed across the street, her sandals slapping the pavement. She carried her clipboard like a weapon. "That car has been parked in your driveway for 2 weeks, she announced sharply, pointing to Ethan's government-issued sedan. "Unregistered vehicles aren't allowed. You failed to comply with HOA policy number 14B. Ethan leaned calmly on the broom handle. "It's my work vehicle, ma'am. Perfectly legal." Karen scoffed. "Work vehicle? Don't make excuses. And another thing, You haven't filed your residency forms with the HOA office. You can't just move in without our approval." Neighbors began to gather quietly along the sidewalks, whispering. Karen loved an audience. It made her feel powerful. She raised her voice so everyone could hear. "You don't belong here. I don't know how you got this house, but you will not ruin the order of Willow Creek." Ethan exhaled slowly, his patience holding strong. "I signed the deed, paid the dues. Everything is in order. I'm not here to cause trouble." But Karen wasn't listening. She had already convinced herself he was an intruder, a liar who had somehow bypassed the system. Her voice cracked with anger as she jabbed her finger at him. "I'll give you one more chance to leave willingly. If not, I'll have you removed myself." The crowd murmured. Some neighbors looked uncomfortable, while others shook their heads, embarrassed by Karen's theatrics. Ethan stayed calm, his jaw tightening only slightly. He could have flashed his badge and ended it, but instead he stepped aside, letting Karen's words echo through the neighborhood. Deep down, Ethan knew this was leading somewhere bigger, somewhere she couldn't control. And Karen? She was already planning her next move. Karen couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. Every time she looked across the street, her anger grew. She had convinced herself that he was lying about owning the house, that his quiet attitude was proof he was hiding something. In her mind, Ethan wasn't a resident. He was a trespasser. And in Willow Creek Estates, trespassers had no place. That evening, as Ethan unloaded a few more boxes from his car, Karen's breaking point arrived. She stood on her porch, clutching her phone, her lips pressed tightly together. The neighborhood was quiet, the sun sinking low behind the rooftops, when she finally dialed 911. Her voice carried urgency. "Yes, this is Karen Wilson, board member of Willow Creek HOA. There's a man trespassing at 1459 Maple Lane. He refuses to leave the property. I believe he's dangerous." Her words were sharp, each one designed to paint Ethan as a threat. She added dramatic details, her tone quivering as though she were in real danger. To the dispatcher, it sounded like a homeowner in distress. Within minutes, sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Across the street, Ethan had noticed her frantic whispering into the phone. His instincts as a detective kicked in immediately. He had seen this pattern before. False reports, exaggerated claims, and individuals who believed their authority outweighed the truth. Still, instead of reacting, he quietly leaned against his car and waited. Soon, 2 patrol cars turned the corner, their lights flashing briefly as they slowed near Ethan's driveway. Curious neighbors stepped outside, phones in hand, recording the scene as if it were a neighborhood drama unfolding live. Karen waved her arms dramatically to the officers. "Over here! That's the man! He's been illegally staying in that house for weeks. I've told him to leave, but he won't. He's hostile and refuses to cooperate." The officers glanced at Ethan, who stood calmly with his arms crossed. His expression gave nothing away. He didn't raise his voice, didn't argue. He simply nodded as one of the officers approached. "Sir," the officer said firmly, "we've received a report of trespassing. Can we speak with you for a moment?" Karen folded her arms tightly, her eyes gleaming with victory. This was it, she thought. The man would be escorted out, and she would once again prove her power as the neighborhood's watchful protector. But Ethan's steady gaze told a different story. He knew something Karen did not, something that would soon turn this entire confrontation upside down. The patrol cars rolled to a stop in front of Ethan's driveway, their headlights sweeping across the neatly trimmed lawns of Willow Creek. Neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering and holding up their phones to capture the scene. For them, it was entertainment. For Karen, it was validation. She marched toward the officers, voice rising. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. That man is trespassing. He refuses to provide documents, refuses to cooperate with the HOA, and he's intimidating everyone around him." Her words poured out with conviction, as though she were delivering testimony in court. She pointed an accusing finger at Ethan, who stood calmly beside his vehicle, arms crossed loosely over his chest. The taller officer turned to Ethan. "Sir, we received a report of trespassing. Can you show us identification or proof that you live here?" The crowd leaned forward, anticipation buzzing in the air. Karen smirked, already tasting victory. This was the moment, she thought. The law was on her side. Ethan's steady voice cut through the tension. "Of course, officer. I'll be glad to clear this up." He reached slowly into his pocket, pulling out his wallet. Karen's eyes narrowed, eager to watch him stumble. Instead, Ethan calmly handed over his driver's license, which matched the address on the mailbox. The officer glanced at it, then looked back at Karen. "Ma'am, his ID lists this address. It appears he lives here." Karen shook her head violently. No, that can't be right. IDs can be faked." "He's lying. He's dangerous. You need to remove him before he does something to our neighborhood." Her dramatic tone unsettled some of the neighbors, but others began to shift uncomfortably, realizing the story wasn't adding up. Still, the officers followed protocol. "Sir, do you have any other form of documentation? Deed papers, utility bills, anything to confirm residency?" the second officer asked, keeping his voice professional. Ethan gave a small smile, as if he had been expecting this exact question. "I do. But before I show you those, there's something else you should know." The officers exchanged glances, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Karen huffed impatiently, tapping her foot. "Don't listen to him. He's stalling. Just take him in." But Ethan didn't flinch. He slid another object out of his wallet, this one gleaming in the fading sunlight. The silver badge caught the attention of everyone in the crowd, sending a ripple of gasps through the gathering. Karen's smirk froze. The officers stiffened. Ethan's voice was calm but firm. "Detective Ethan Cole, I'm not just the homeowner here. I'm also law enforcement." Gasps rippled through the gathered neighbors as Ethan held his badge high enough for everyone to see. The polished silver glinted under the streetlight, silencing the whispers for a brief moment. Karen's face drained of color. That's fake," she stammered, her confident tone faltering. "He probably bought that online. Don't let him trick you." The officers exchanged looks, already familiar with Ethan's name. One of them straightened, a new layer of respect in his posture. "Detective Cole," he confirmed, nodding slowly. "We've heard of you from the department. You just transferred here, didn't you?" Ethan offered a polite nod. "That's correct. I've been keeping a low profile while settling into my new home. I didn't think I'd need to reveal my badge this early." The crowd buzzed again, voices rising in surprise and disbelief. Some neighbors whispered apologies under their breath, realizing they had stood by while Karen spread lies. Others shook their heads, embarrassed for the spectacle their neighborhood had become. But Karen wasn't ready to surrender her power. She stepped forward, waving her clipboard as though it carried more weight than the badge in Ethan's hand. Detective or not, you've broken HOA policy. This neighborhood has rules. You can't just move in without our approval. You think you're above us because of that shiny badge? Ethan's jaw tightened. His patience was thinning, but his voice remained steady. Ma'am, I purchased this home legally. I've paid all required dues. I have every right to be here. What you've done tonight, filing a false police report, is not only irresponsible, it's a crime. The word crime hit the air like a gavel. Neighbors shifted uneasily, eyes darting between Karen and Ethan. Karen's bravado cracked. I was just trying to protect the community, she muttered, her voice trembling now. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know who you really were? The taller officer spoke firmly. Ma'am, you made a serious accusation. Dispatch treated your call as an emergency. If it weren't for Detective Cole's composure, this could have escalated dangerously. Ethan lowered his badge, but kept his gaze fixed on Karen. You wanted me out of this neighborhood at any cost. You lied to law enforcement to try to get your way. That's not protecting the community. That's abusing it. Karen's shoulders sagged, her confidence slipping away as the weight of her actions sank in. But deep inside, a flicker of defiance still burned. Because Karen wasn't finished. Not yet. The silence on Maple Lane was heavy, broken only by the faint chirping of crickets and the buzzing whispers of neighbors. All eyes were on Karen, her clipboard clutched tightly in her hands, as though it could shield her from the truth unraveling before her. The taller officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, making a false report to law enforcement is a serious offense. Do you realize what could have happened tonight? Karen swallowed hard. Her face, once flushed with pride, was pale now. I didn't lie, she insisted weakly. I just wanted to make sure our neighborhood was safe. He moved in without introducing himself to the board, without approval. That's suspicious, isn't it? The shorter officer shook his head. That doesn't make it a police matter. The 911 line is for emergencies, not HOA disputes. You tied up resources that could have gone to someone in real danger. Karen's grip on her clipboard loosened. A sheet of paper slipped to the ground, fluttering in the evening breeze. The crowd of neighbors, emboldened now, began to murmur openly. She always does this. Every week it's something new with her. Imagine if someone really needed help tonight. The whispers stung worse than Ethan's calm words. Karen glanced around, suddenly aware that the audience she once commanded had turned against her. Ethan finally stepped forward, his voice low but firm. Karen, you didn't just inconvenience me. You put everyone at risk. False reports make officers cautious and waste time. What if they had arrived here expecting a violent suspect? What if someone had gotten hurt because of your exaggerations? Karen's chin trembled. I was only doing my duty. That's all I've ever done. Keep this place in order. Without me, this neighborhood would fall apart. But her words rang hollow. The officers no longer looked at her as a concerned citizen. They looked at her as someone who had crossed a line. Detective Cole, the taller officer said carefully. Do you want to press charges? This could qualify as filing a false police report. The crowd held its breath. Karen's eyes widened in panic. For the first time, she realized how deeply she had overstepped. The clipboard slipped entirely from her hands and clattered against the driveway. Ethan looked at her. Really looked at her. She wasn't the powerful enforcer of rules she pretended to be. She was just a frightened woman, clinging to authority that wasn't hers to wield. He exhaled, choosing his words with precision. I'll decide soon. But one thing is clear. This kind of behavior cannot continue. Karen's knees seemed to weaken, and for a brief moment, the self-proclaimed guardian of Willow Creek looked very small under the glow of the streetlights. The neighbors, once silent, began to shift from passive observers to vocal witnesses. And in that moment, Karen understood. Her power was no longer hers. But what she didn't know was that the night wasn't over yet, because Ethan was about to make a choice that would change everything. The night air felt heavier than ever. Karen stood frozen in the middle of the driveway, her once confident stance replaced by trembling hands and darting eyes. The clipboard, her symbol of power, lay abandoned on the concrete. Around her, the neighbors whispered openly now, some recording the scene, others shaking their heads in disapproval. Ethan kept his badge in his hand, his steady presence drawing every gaze. The officer stood by, waiting for his decision. For once, Karen wasn't the loudest voice on the street. She was silent, caught between fear and disbelief. Karen, Ethan said, his tone calm but unwavering. You didn't just call in a false report. You weaponized the system against someone you didn't like. That is not only irresponsible, it's unlawful. Karen's lips parted as though to argue, but no words came. Her authority had crumbled. She glanced toward the neighbors, searching for support, but found only folded arms and disapproving frowns. You could have ruined his life, one woman from the crowd called out. What if the police had believed you right away? Yeah, another added. What if they had drawn their weapons because of your lies? Each comment made Karen shrink further. For years she had ruled with fear and intimidation, but now the very community she claimed to protect was standing against her. Ethan looked to the officers. You asked if I wanted to press charges. Truthfully, I could. A false 911 call wastes resources, puts lives at risk, and erodes trust in the system. He paused, his gaze sharp as it met Karen's. But tonight, I'm giving you a choice. Karen blinked, startled. A choice? Yes. Ethan stepped closer, his badge glinting in the lamplight. You can continue down this path, face the legal consequences, go through the system you so easily abused. Or, he gestured toward the neighbors watching, you can accept that this community deserves better. You can step down from the HOA board, stop the harassment, and take responsibility for the damage you've caused. The silence stretched. Karen's chest rose and fell quickly as she processed his words. For the first time, her authority wasn't hers to command. It was his to decide. Tears welled in her eyes, though she tried to hide them. If I step down, if I admit I was wrong, will this end here? Ethan nodded once. That's your way forward. But understand this. If I see another stunt like tonight's, I won't hesitate to put you in handcuffs myself. The weight of his words landed like a final verdict. Karen bent down slowly, picked up her fallen clipboard, and held it close. Not as a weapon now, but as a reminder of how empty her authority had become. Her voice cracked as she spoke. I'll step down. The neighbors murmured, some in relief, others in quiet satisfaction. For the first time in years, they felt the neighborhood might finally breathe again. Ethan gave a curt nod, then turned to the officers. "That will be sufficient for tonight." The officers exchanged looks but respected his decision. "Understood, Detective." As the patrol cars pulled away and the crowd dispersed, Karen shuffled back toward her house, her shoulders hunched under the weight of her own actions. Ethan remained in his driveway a moment longer, watching the street settle back into calm. He knew it wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was justice enough for now. And for Willow Creek Estates, it was the beginning of something new. A neighborhood no longer ruled by fear, but by accountability.